Hey guys, got another one I want to share with you. It's somebody sent in, a viewer. He felt it was important to get this out. Let me see where I put it. But it's a pretty interesting story. If you are bothered by violence or anything, you may want to not listen to this story. It's pretty in depth. um, this happened in Kansas. It happened on Friday, August 20th. The moon phase was a gibbous moon. It was actually the blue moon on that night. This individual's name, he was 52 years old, wants to remain anonymous. He said they live on a field and they run corn. They harvest corn and grow corn for a living. Across the field from him was approximately 10 acres that another gentleman bought, an older gentleman. He said it was probably in his 60s, lived alone, very nice gentleman. They got to know him over time, and he would come over to their house and eat dinner and play with the kids and hang out usually on Sundays. Well, he was also an avid hunter, the older gentleman that had moved in, and he came over one Sunday and was telling everybody about a cave he had found. And he said in this cave there was really large dogs in there, but he said these dogs seemed like they were pretty intelligent. He'd never seen any dogs like that. Well, he left them his food that he took usually when he goes out on a journey. He said he takes a small meal. Well, evidently these animals had followed him back home because he started telling them stories about he was out working one night in his garage and they came up to the garage and were pushing on the garage and like making growling noises and kind of starting to scare him. And he was telling everybody, he's like, well, I wish they wouldn't come up, like they're doing right now. And of course, he said we wasn't believing him at the time of exactly what was going on because he started telling them that these dogs that had come up to his house were walking on their hind legs in his backyard. They were at his window all night. They were howling, growling, just weird things. Well, whenever the older guy would come over to their house on Sundays, he had his own little knock he would do. That way they knew it was him at the door, and then they would say, come on in, or whatever. They just thing they done. He said they all had their own knock. Well, he would come over, he knocked, and he was telling them one day, he's like, the other night I was in bed, and I was watching TV, and something tried to raise my bedroom window. I don't know what it was, but it kept trying to raise my window. He said I could hear it growling. So I got up, switched on the outside light, and whenever I looked out, I saw two of them run off, and it was the two dogs. But they were running on their hind legs. He said something like he'd never seen. So he started feeling like they were starting to get kind of threatening, and he was kind of, being concerned. So he said, I decided I would tell him, okay, I'll come over to your house one night, and we'll see if anything happens. So he went and stayed at the older gentleman's house, and he said while we were there, nothing happened. He said the dogs barked, common things went on, but nothing that made him think that there was any dogs walking on their hind legs or anything that he said he had been seeing. A few nights had passed, and he came over on a Thursday night, which was really weird. He said he usually didn't come over on a Thursday night, it was always on a Sunday, and he acted kind of anxious, kind of worried. And he asked him if he could stay the night. Of course, they said, sure, you can come on in, stay the night. And they got him a pallet made, they said, in the floor, and he slept in there and said he slept sound. Well, the next night, he went back home, and he came back, and he told them, he said, he tried to get in my back door last night. And they said he was acting really, really scared. And they told him, they said, well, just make sure your doors are locked, They're still kind of thinking it's coyotes, They're not believing all these things he's seeing, which is a mistake a lot of people make because they don't believe him. And he even says, I feel bad now for not believing him because we'd never witnessed anything like this ourselves. We always thought it was just coyotes. Well, a few nights pass, and they hear a gunshot in the middle of the night. So he says, I jump up and I run over to the elderly man's house. And he said, whenever I get to his house, he's out in the yard with the spotlight and his 30-06. He says, I done it. He said, I nailed one of them. I downed him. And he said, are you sure? And he said, yeah. He said, I shot it, seen it go down. It yelped, it hollered, everything. So they said they went out and they looked and they found blood. He said, so I told him the next morning we'll track it and find out where it went. Well, the next morning came around, and they followed the blood as far as they could. The blood went to the old cave that he had found where he thought they were staying, and they inspected the cave. And he said they looked kind of into it, but they wouldn't go real far into it because it got really dark. They didn't have flashlights. It's the middle of the day. They didn't carry a flashlight because it was daylight. So they kind of looked around and thought, well, you killed, the coyote that heard the gunshot. He said, so I told him he probably won't be back. So the next night passes, nothing happens. The next night passes, nothing happens. Well, Sunday comes around, and he says he doesn't show up for dinner. So he said we thought it was kind of weird, but we thought, well, maybe he's doing something. Monday comes around, and he sees a bunch of like family and stuff over at his house, and it sounded a lot like the other story we've heard. He goes over, and they say that the elderly man had a bad accident. He was mowing with the tractor, fell off the tractor, and the tractor ran over him and had shredded him. Parts of him were on the house and everything. So, pretty bad. Well, a few weeks pass or whatever, and they get a knock at the door, and it's the other family, and they say, hey, we're going over to collect some items. We were wondering if you could come over and help us because they're older people. And he said, sure, I'll come help you do whatever you need to do. So he said the first thing we did is went in the garage, and they wanted to get the lawnmower to take to their house because I guess it was their stuff. He said we had to move the tractor to get the lawnmower, and he said when I went to move the tractor, I noticed that the tractor hadn't been moved. There wasn't no blood on it or anything, so I was wondering how could this have been an accident. He said I went ahead and moved the tractor, they got the lawnmower and everything. I went home. I was telling my wife about it. He said while we're sitting there at the table, we get the old man's special knock. He said all of us got goosebumps. Our hair just stood up. He said I walked to the back door and I look outside and there's nothing there. And then he says, and this is the part that's pretty freaky, he hears his name called out like the old man. But he said it wasn't exactly like the old man, but it was definitely his name. He said I shut the door, locked it up, called the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department came out, spotlighted, didn't see anything. He said, so I asked the sheriff while he was there, I thought he was ran over by the tractor, so how was the tractor in the garage all cleaned up? He said he looked at me and told me I shouldn't be poking my nose in business that wasn't mine, that I should just continue growing my corn. He said not wanting to push the law or cause any heartaches or trouble with the law because we've been farming in this area for a long time, and he said I know that trouble with the law can cause a lot of trouble. So he said we just kind of let it go. So later on, some of the family comes over and they invite him to come over for the funeral. And he says, sure, we'd love to come to the funeral. We knew him really well. He was a good guy. Our family loved him. Our kids loved him. And they told us it would be a closed casket. And I told them, yeah, I would imagine because, getting run over by the tractor and everything. And she said, tractor. And he said, I looked at her and she goes, he wasn't killed by a tractor. And I said, he wasn't. She said, no. He was attacked by a pack of coyotes is what they think. And I just looked at her and I said, so I was told a tractor. And she had never heard of it being a tractor, just coyotes. Well, she said the reason it was going to be a closed casket is because the coyotes had killed him and had removed his head, and the investigators found his head in a cave that was mixed with other animal skulls where these coyotes were taking their prey back to eat it. Okay. She also says the game warden assured her that they went and killed the 2 coyotes that had done this and they had been removed. He says this was over a year ago, and to this date they have not had any more trouble. So he said I believe that the game warden or whoever did take care of whatever was there, but he said I believe we'll never know the truth. And at sundown my kids don't play outside no more. We go inside and lock the doors. And he said thank you, Mike, for getting awareness out because I never would have believed this unless it would have happened to us. And I hope people don't wait too long until it happens to them to be believers. Guys, that's a crazy, scary story. And it just goes to show how the cover-ups work, from a tractor to a coyote to his head was missing and carried to a cave. That's pretty crazy. I wanted to share that with you. He thought it was important. We've communicated back and forth by email. He doesn't want to be named. But he felt it was important to get that out. So if you're in Kansas, there's some things up there, guys, for sure. So be careful and keep your head on a swivel. Until next time, guys, God bless.